If you have a chalice near you, I invite you to light it now. And if not, to hold your hands together to form a chalice. As we begin this morning's service, welcome to you all.
There is a band of women, and to our man are born, emerging from the darkness past and looking toward the morn. Their mothers labored, waited through a night without a star. The morning shows the suffrage flag that bears the woman's star. Hurrah, hurrah, for equal rights, hurrah. Hurrah for the suffrage flag that bears the woman's star. This band is for all reforms, war shall be at an end. Bayonets and swords shall rust, we'll use the brain, the pen. Laden with precious freight now thunders on the progress car. At the headlight waves the suffrage flag that bears the woman's star. Hurrah, hurrah, for equal rights, hurrah. Hurrah for the suffrage flag that bears the woman's star. Ship of state for ages was guided by starlight, till the cluster in our flag almost dispelled the night. 'Tis freedom's day, our flag shall be a sun no night can mar. We'll add the light of the suffrage flag that bears the woman's star. Hurrah, hurrah, for equal rights, hurrah. Hurrah for the suffrage flag that bears the woman's star. Thus evolves the greatest triumph of dual human race. Church and state, the home and school, and law and love embrace. We'll have a perfect nation, we'll march from near and far. To glory 'neath the stars and stripes, it shall bear the woman's star. Hurrah, hurrah, for equal rights, hurrah. Hurrah for the suffrage flag that bears the woman's star. Hurrah, hurrah, for equal rights, hurrah. Hurrah for the stars and stripes, it shall bear the woman's star.
From the Woman's Journal, 1883. The Massachusetts National Woman Suffrage Association held a convention at Bedford on the 9th of this month. The meetings were very successful. Bedford has one of the most persistent and faithful of the groups of suffragists in the state. Some of the Bedford suffragists were constant helpers in the anti-slavery cause, and this later reform finds them always at their posts.
Thank you so much, Sharon. It is an important day for us to be reflecting back on the passage of the 19th Amendment. And I am excited that we are gathered here to celebrate that important victory a century ago. And even more exciting, it seems to me, as we approach the start of a political convention at which a woman and a woman of color will be nominated for Vice President of the United States. So it is an important time for sure for us to gather. Welcome, everybody. As I said, I am Deb Weiner. I am the Developmental Director of Faith Development for Children here at First Parish in Bedford. Very glad to welcome you to our Sunday worship. We gather for worship every Sunday at 10 a.m. and that includes this summer. We will be taking Labor Day weekend off for a weekend of refreshment and getting a break. But otherwise, on Sunday mornings, you will find us here, and we're glad that you have joined us for sure. There's lots going on at First Parish in Bedford, even during the summer, and I hope that you will refer to the regular updates, which are mailed out by our administrator, Joan Petros, and also check the church website for regular gatherings and goings on. Today, we're very excited, as I said, to be welcoming our church historian, Sharon McDonald, who knows a great deal about the history of the town of Bedford and about United States history as well. So it is a good day for us to be together. I'd like to invite you now to join in our unison affirmation, which has been mailed out, and Delcy also has an image to share with us. So if you would join in saying these words: love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia, y el servicio es su ley. Este es nuestro gran pacto, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad en el amor, y ayudarnos los unos a los otros. Every time I say this, I wish that I had studied Spanish in school. Alas, I did not, but I continue to learn. Friends, this is also the time in our service when we invite your generosity for the good work of the First Parish in Bedford and for the work of this congregation in the larger world. There are many ways in which the members and friends of this congregation carry the message of Unitarian Universalism out into the community and the world. And so, as you see the slide on your screens now, note that even though we do not gather in person right now, we do receive and depend on your generosity in order to continue our ministries. So please be generous in any way that you can, and we'll enjoy some more music from the wonderful Buffie Groves.
Just 100 years ago, our mothers and our sires lit up for all the world to see the flame of freedom's fires. Through bloodshed and through hardship, they labored in the fight. Today we women labor still for liberty and right. Oh, we wear a yellow ribbon upon our woman's breast. We are prouder of its sunny hue than of a royal crest. 'Twas God's own primal color, born of purity and light. We wear it now for liberty, for justice and for right. We boast our land of freedom, the unshackling of the slaves. We point with proud though bleeding hearts to myriad of graves. They tell the story of a war that ended slavery's night, and still we women struggle for our liberty, our right. Oh, we wear a yellow ribbon upon our woman's breast. We are prouder of its sunny hue than of a royal crest. 'Twas God's own primal color, born of purity and light. We wear it now for liberty, for justice and for right.
And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our homilist and speaker, Sharon McDonald, to share with us her thoughts on the suffragists who lived next door. Sharon, over to you.
I'll begin with bearing the yellow ribbon. Can you see my yellow ribbon? And it says votes for women, but I'm gonna cover it up with my woman's star. There. You may wonder why we're saying suffragist instead of suffragette. Suffragette was the name for the British women's rights group, and it was an insult. In America, they were called suffragists, and you'll have to make sure that I don't say suffragette, because it does come naturally, doesn't it? I'm painfully aware that I have to read this. I realized night before last, memorizing it isn't going to happen. So they were called soapbox suffragists. They would arrive in town with a wooden box to stand on, set up on a busy corner, and take turns lecturing the group that gathered. Sometimes they would speak from the town common, or from steps of a public building, or standing in the back of an open car. Once, when she was warned out of a seaside town as a public nuisance, a speaker went down to the beach and waded out into shallow water, neutral territory, and gave her call to action from there. A group of suffragists came to SAGG, that stands for Boston Equal Suffrage Association for Good Government, one Saturday afternoon in 1909. They wanted some practice before they went on their speaking tour. Go out to Bedford, they were advised. They're a nice, quiet town. They won't heckle you or give you any trouble. So the suffragists posted their handbills all around Bedford, advertising an open-air meeting. But on the appointed day, there was a hard rainstorm. A little boy and his wet dog were the only listeners. But it was sunny the next week. 5 women spoke one by one, standing in the rear of an open car. By the time they had finished, there were 100 to 150 Bedfordians listening. This is not the first time that Bedford had heard suffragists hold forth. Just like many Massachusetts towns, Bedford had been a sizzle with women's rights activists. Once they had been called the most persistent and faithful groups in the state, and I'm here to tell you about it. The 19th century was an era of reform. There were plenty of issues, not only suffrage, but temperance, utopian societies like Fruitlands and Brook Farm, religion, remember the great Unitarian controversy, and slavery. In the years leading up to the Civil War, there were staunch abolitionists in Bedford, few, but staunch. Did you know that the great Black orator and abolitionist Frederick Douglass lectured here? They convened in one of the 2 churches, so it may have been our sanctuary where he spoke. The engagement was not received well, he wrote in his diary, but it seems he inspired several individuals. One was a Bedford resident named Lucinda Hosmer. He invited her to his house in Lynn, Mass. For dinner, and she was proud to call him her long-remembered friend. She wrote to him in 1863, "I was always anti-slavery since I thought of it at all, but never till I saw you did I feel it in my power to do anything about it." Hosmer's great talent was letter writing. After the Civil War, her passion turned to women's suffrage, and her letters did not stop. Now she was writing long letters to the editor of the Woman's Journal, a national weekly newsletter concerned with women's educational, legal, and voting rights. I found a full run of it at the Schlesinger Library at Harvard, indexed, so we can glimpse what was happening in Bedford as seen by Lucinda Hosmer, the unofficial correspondent. Hosmer described a society of Bedford women who would meet in each other's parlors for an afternoon's discussion of the issues. Grape juice, not sherry, was the beverage. They were very strong on temperance. Attendance grew and threatened to outgrow most ladies' parlors entirely. The group now included 3 men, the doctor, the newspaper editor, and Lucinda's influential cousin, Jerome. The program would be musical entertainment on the violin or the trumpet or the piano, and then several would read papers they had written on the subject of suffrage. Sometimes they held programs in the auditorium of Town Hall, hearing guest speakers that included women suffragists from all over Massachusetts. Soon they were doing more than playing the piano and reading papers. They sent petitions, many petitions, to the Massachusetts Senate, asking that women be granted their right to vote. Bedford's population was less than 1,000 residents, but they got almost 100 signatures on every petition. That's 10%. Hosmer herself collected 13 petitions in 10 years. Hosmer wrote, "I think it is a good idea to flood the legislature with the reasons women have for desiring the ballot, that they can no longer say women do not want to vote. When I hear a man say that, I always think he has been associated with overburdened women or the lovers of fashion, and not with the far-seeking lovers of humanity and equal rights." In 1869, there was a glint of light. The Massachusetts Senate granted women the right to serve on school committees, women, children, school committees. Ironically, women could not vote for school committee members. Still, the Bedford Woman Suffrage Society would pick a candidate from among themselves and send her name to the men at the town caucus. The first year, Carrie L. Bacon was their candidate. Now, Carrie Bacon was the cousin by marriage of Abigail and Charles Bacon, after whom our Bacon Room in the church is named. When the men voted, Ms. Bacon carried the day, pun intended, and served on the school board alongside 2 male incumbents. Women on the suffrage side were not happy with the bone they had been tossed, and so they petitioned the Bedford selectmen to allow women to vote in local elections. The selectmen put it on the warrant. It was roundly defeated at town meeting. It failed in the state legislature too. It was 10 years later, in 1879, that the state legislature gave women a pittance. They were allowed to vote, but only for their local school committee. To vote, of course, a woman had to go to the town meeting. Town meeting must have been a bit rowdy at times. The men stood around in the back, hats on, smoking and spitting. But that first year, Ms. Hosmer and 10 others did go and found that the men had cleaned up their acts. They were sitting politely in their seats, hats off, and there was no spitting or smoking. Well, one man tried to smoke, but he was stopped. When she passed out the ballots, Hosmer joked it was like she was handing out ice cream. Hosmer was sorry she couldn't have voted for abolition all those years ago. In her opinion, the Civil War might have been fought and won with ballots instead of bullets if women had had the vote. Now the issue was temperance. At this town meeting, the men could have made selling liquor in Bedford illegal, but they let it pass. And the Bedford House, the big hotel in the center of town, continued to cater to drinkers. The suffragists insisted that women wielding the ballot would have been a force for the general good and not just for temperance. The Woman's Journal quotes Lucinda Hosmer, "And we see fraud so rampant among our lawmakers, sapping the foundation of the morals of the people, making it easy for the big burglars and thieves at Washington to escape. The common burglar we can protect ourselves against with bars and bolts, but we are powerless against those in high places. How the good women long for the influence a ballot would give them in helping to right such wrongs." Their sisters who disagreed were just as vehement. The Massachusetts Association opposed to the further extension of suffrage to women. The MAOFESW rejected the radical women who wanted the vote. These suffrage women were for feminism, free love, birth control, socialism, college education, and the labor movement. The anti-suffragists wrote to the legislature about 1913, "Our creed is simply this: the ballot will not, cannot remedy wrongs. In the names of the women we represent, in the name of the freedom of all women, we ask you not to place this state among the suffrage states." When women were allowed to vote, but only for school committee, you remember, Miss Eliza Bacon Weber, a determined 80-year-old, was the first in line to register. For several years, Ms. Weber was president of the Bedford Suffrage League. A league is a step up from a society, so they progressed. Bacon Weber was famous for never missing an opportunity to lead the conversation around to women's suffrage. It seems possible that even women who agreed with her crossed the street when they saw her coming. But she was a fierce figurehead in Bedford. "To have strength of mind is not unwomanly," Lucinda Hosmer said. I think it must have been at the state convention of the Suffrage Association in 1883 that the famous Lucy Stone spoke in Bedford. This time, the correspondent for the Woman's Journal, not Lucinda Hosmer, got distracted and described the antique teacups that her hostess brought out for the supper afterward. Teacups 150 years old, instead of Stone's speech. But the Journal printed a postcard that Lucinda Hosmer wrote to Lucy Stone 3 months later. It reflected her weariness. "Dear Mrs. Stone, so we have got to take up the staff and travel on through another decade, perhaps, before we can help men shoulder the responsibility of governing a great nation, the duties of which seem too hard for them." Lucinda Hosmer. There were small triumphs as well. One year, the minister of our first parish church, Reverend Fairfield, was away at General Assembly and left the parish committee in charge of filling the pulpit while he was gone. He assumed they would hire a typical supply minister, a male. His parishioners knew better and delightedly whispered among themselves it would be Mrs. Eulalia Fairfield, his wife, who would give the sermon. There was a large turnout to hear what she would have to say. The Boston Globe reported afterwards that she presented the sermon with grace and dignity. "It now appears that Mrs. Fairfield was fitted for the ministry," said the Globe, "and only lacks the formality of ordination, which she will doubtless receive in the future." She did not. It seems that all the members of the Bedford Women's Suffrage League were officers of the club, including the men. Miss Hosmer was clear that the suffragists were not against men. They were against corrupt government, and they were determined to change that with their votes. To do that, they had to be equal to men politically. Lucinda Hosmer was confident. when she wrote in 1876, "I feel there has been a marked change in the feelings of the people generally in this place since Ms. Lucy Stone and Ms. Matilda Hindman have lectured here. The phase of ridicule, which I believe all reforms have to pass through, is well past, and many who used to sneer and laugh whenever the subject of woman suffrage was introduced now listen seriously, and I think a few more such lectures would quite redeem the town. As you know, Bedford may have been redeemed, but women had to persist for many more decades before they finally held a ballot in their hand. Most of the women in the Bedford League, including Carrie Bacon, Eliza Weber, and Lucinda Hosmer herself, were long dead when the bells finally rang for women. It was the far-seeing lovers of humanity and human rights that Lucinda Hosmer dreamed they would be. Their work was all part of the struggle for women's rights, and we bow deep vows to them today. The closing words are from Kamala Harris. Don't give up. Our country needs you now more than ever. This is a pivotal moment in the history of our country. Our ideals are at stake, and we all have to fight for who we are. We are all and should be treated as equals, but the disparity in terms of income and inequality for women and women of color is significant. And now for something completely different, Buffy.
Eliza Jane, she had a wheel, its rim was painted red. Eliza had another wheel that turned inside her head. She put the two together, she gave them both a whirl. And now she rides the Parkway sides, a 20th century girl. Oh, have you seen Eliza Jane a-cycling in the park? Oh, have you seen Eliza Jane? The people all remark. They shout, hi, hi, as she rides by. The little doggies bark. All the men have a pain when Eliza Jane goes cycling in the park. This is Emancipation Year, the woman movement's on. Eliza plans to be as a man, 'tis much to think upon. She thinks she needs the ballot, now her freedom to enhance. She wants to pose in functional clothes, it is for this she pants. No more do skirts enfold her, though much her papa grieves. But baggy trousers hold her in their big pneumatic sleeves. For where you see the bloomers bloom, she sits her wheel astride. She makes a sight, would stop a fight, as in the park she rides. Oh, have you seen Eliza Jane a-cycling in the park? Oh, have you seen Eliza Jane? The people all remark. They shout, hi, hi, as she rides by. The little doggies bark. All the men have a pain when Eliza Jane goes cycling in the park. Eliza's learned some cussin', now she's equal to a man. And when she finds it suits her mind, she says her little rats. It isn't very often that she feels that's where she must. But she says it and she means it when her little tires bust. Oh, have you seen Eliza Jane a-cycling in the park? Oh, have you seen Eliza Jane? The people all remark. They shout, hi, hi, as she rides by. The little doggies bark. All the men have a pain when Eliza Jane goes cycling in the park. All the men have a pain when Eliza Jane goes cycling in the park.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Buffy. for this wonderful celebration of the 19th Amendment, which we will officially honor the passage of in 2 days. This is just great. So friends, this is now the time when we can move into a little bit of community hour with one another. So I invite you, if you would like to do that, to stay right here. And I'm going to stop our recording.